How's it going today? I'm good. Hello.
Morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, December 2nd. Crazy to think it's December already. Anyway, this is In Case You Missed American History for 12/2. And if you're watching this, I'm going to guess that you missed class today, and that's okay. Thanks for watching this. I hope you're well. I hope those around you are well. Hope everything's going okay in your world. Enjoy a little Scott Sterling getting smacked in the face. If you've never seen the Scott Sterling videos on YouTube, there's the soccer one, which is far longer than this, and then also a volleyball one. Highly recommend. Stupid videos. Anyway, I'm going to get rolling into what we're doing today. This is kind of the run through, so here we go. So kind of today what we did is we did some reminders, and then we looked at a couple of slides, and then I gave you guys some work time on that U.S. versus the Sioux tribe assignment, which is due on Friday. So here are the reminders. First of all, if you owe me any late work, by the way, it's going to bloop over and over again. The teachers are having a conversation about something. Ignore it. It's nothing to do with you. So anyway, late work. If you owe me anything, I was really happy to see some of you guys handed in some things last night, which I'm actually going to correct as soon as I get done recording this at 8:20 in the morning. But keep that work coming in, because obviously, some of you guys owe me some things. We need to get that taken care of. If you haven't taken that chapter 1 test yet and you can't find the link, please let me know. I'm more than happy to help you out with that. And if you need help on that late work, please ask. Don't forget about the current work that's due on Friday, that U.S. versus the Sioux tribe. We assigned that yesterday. So make sure you're taking a look at that and getting done what you need to get done on that. Okay. Be checking the grades in Infinite Campus, not just this class, but, your other classes too. You want to stay up on where you are. And you also want to notice if, maybe you handed something in and the person didn't grade it. So make sure and take a look at that and ask questions. Remember, it is your grade. And then last but not least, we are taking a test on Friday on chapter 2. We're almost done. We actually only have 4 slides left to cover, 2 today, 2 tomorrow, and then the test on Friday, and you will be good to go. And I'm going to try to make sure the test is doable during the class period. Okay, so on Friday, you're going to check in with me. I'm going to share the test form with you, and then we will go from there. Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to look at 2 more tribes. Yesterday, we talked about the Cheyenne Indians and what happened when they tried to surrender. Today, we're going to look at the Nez Perce tribe, who tried to leave the United States, and then the Sioux tribe, who tried to fight back. So we'll talk about those 2 tribes and what kind of happened to them. I'm going to give you the abbreviated version because obviously I'm used to having 85-minute classes to talk about these things, and honestly, the Sioux tribe alone is probably good for at least an entire class. All right, so we're going to give you the clipped-down version. All right, and then I'm going to give you guys some work time, so if you've planned on some time for American history today, you can work on any back work or on that U.S. versus the Sioux tribe that's due on Friday. And again, ask questions if you need help. That's what I'm here for. I want to help you out if you're confused, help you do better. Okay? All right, here we go. So first, we're going to look at the Nez Perce tribe, and that is on the right. That is Chief Joseph, who we'll be talking about quite a bit on this slide. And I think probably the most important things for you to know. I'm gonna kind of just go off script here and just talk about the Nez Perce and what happened to them. So the Nez Perce are viewed by historians as being a pretty peaceful tribe. It's not that they didn't have any conflict with white people. It's just that there were so few and they were so nonviolent that when it comes down to it, the Nez Perce are probably viewed as one of the most peaceful, helpful tribes that inhabited the American West during this time period. The Nez Perce lived in Idaho and, basically spent all their time, doing the things that the tribe did culturally while living in the state of Idaho. They were famous back east because when Lewis and Clark had gone out to map the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, they came upon the Nez Perce Indians, and a number of the people in the expedition were not doing well. And the Nez Perce let them stay with them, nursed people back to health, fed them, gave them supplies. And then when Lewis and Clark continued on with their journey, the Nez Perce actually lent them a guide to take them out to the Pacific Ocean and help them along the way, along with giving them some horses and things like that. So the Nez Perce had always been really, really helpful. The Nez Perce had a number of good chiefs who had led them peacefully through their time period. One of those chiefs had a son who eventually becomes known as Chief Joseph. Now, Chief Joseph's father knew that he kind of saw what was happening. He saw that manifest destiny was happening. He saw that whites were creeping further and further west, and that the number of whites in the west was starting to increase. And so when Joseph was a little boy, his father sent him east to go to white schools. Now, Joseph's name actually translates to thunder rolling down the mountain, but that didn't work real well with white kids and white teachers, and so they just started calling him Joseph. Joseph went to school in the East. He went to high school in the East. He even graduated from an American college, was fluent in English, did really, really well in school. When he was done, he went back to his tribe in Idaho. And within a few years, his father fell ill and was dying. And he called his son in and said, "Son, I'm about done for. You're going to take over for me. I'm going to ask you one favor." And Joseph said, "Whatever you want, Dad. What do you need?" And the father looked at him and said, "Don't give our land to white people." Now, I don't know if anyone's ever asked you to make a deathbed promise. I hope you never get put in that position. But if that's the case, you kind of feel obliged to say, yeah, I'll do that. You don't go, "No, okay, sorry, a little inconvenient. Don't want to do that." And so Joseph promised his father that the tribe would keep their lands. And that worked pretty well for a few years. And then gold was found on their land. And the Nez Perce were helpful. They're like, "Oh, yeah, there's more of it over there." But as we talked about yesterday with Cheyenne, when a few people find gold, more people show up, and the people started to show up in greater and greater numbers. The Nez Perce didn't attack. They weren't attacked. But then kind of the last straw hit when a group of people showed up and decided they wanted to build a railroad that went from, basically almost followed like I-94, I-90. It was going to go up from Chicago, up in through Minnesota, in Wisconsin, Minnesota, across North Dakota, across Montana, into Idaho, which was in the Nez Perce land, and then finally into Washington or Oregon. I can't remember where it was going to end. At that point, they asked the Nez Perce to move. Now, the Nez Perce, Joseph was given a choice. Do you want to move? Do you want to try to stay? And Joseph kind of weighed the options and said, well, I see what's happening to other tribes who are resisting, and my people are not a tribe of warriors. And therefore, even though I'm breaking the promise to my father, we'll leave. Where do you want us to go? Well, they said, well, since you were so cooperative, we're not going to ask you to go to Oklahoma or Indian Territory. Let's remember where the Cheyenne ended up. Instead, we're going to send you guys to the Lapwai Reservation, which was in Washington, which was actually very nearby. And so Joseph and his people agreed, and they packed up their stuff, and they were walking to the Lapwai Reservation. Along the way, there were a number of settlers that were passing them by on covered wagons and on horses and giving them a hard time, saying things to them, all those different things. When a problem happened, one of the wagons of people was insulting some Nez Perce, we'll call them warriors, we'll call them hunters. Regardless, there were some boys about your age. And the way that the story goes, one of those settlers spit on one of the boys. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not much of a fighter. But I do think that there are lines that people shouldn't cross. There are things that you shouldn't say to anybody ever, and there are things that shouldn't be done ever. And on my short list of those things is I don't think that you should ever spit in someone's face. I think that's pretty disrespectful. Well, when the settler spit in the kid's face, the kid pulled out his bow and shot the settler, killing him. Obviously, the U.S. Army did not like this, and were going to arrest the boy and its murderer. So back then, they were probably going to hang him. And so Chief Joseph and the tribe made the decision that instead of continuing on and giving up their tribal member, they were going to hang a hard right turn and go north and try to get to Canada, figuring that no one would chase them to Canada, and in Canada, they could live free. Well, rather than the U.S. Army letting them go, the U.S. Army chased them. And a number of small battles broke out along the way. The Nez Perce always kind of seemed to get away. But then, unfortunately, the Nez Perce were caught in a place called the Bear Paw Mountains, about 30 miles from the Canadian border. At that point, Chief Joseph decided to give up. And in his famous speech that he gave, he said the line, "From where the sun now stands, I shall fight no more forever," meaning we are done. We give up. We realize we can't fight you. Well, the U.S. Army backed out on their original promise and decided that since the Nez Perce had tried to run, that they should be punished, and took the tribe and made the tribe go to Oklahoma. As Joseph's punishment for trying to lead them to Canada, Joseph was separated from his tribe, and he was put on the Lapwai Reservation in Washington, and so he was separated from his people. A few years later, Chief Joseph died, natural causes. They couldn't find anything wrong with him. So on his death certificate, it actually says that he died from a broken heart. So the tribe that tried to run away wasn't even allowed to run away. They still ended up in Oklahoma, or like Joseph, in Washington. Now, the last tribe that we're going to look at is going to be the Sioux. Now, the Sioux, how do I say this? The Sioux had the ability to fight back. I've read some things that they think that the Sioux may have had the fifth or fourth or third best army in the world at this time in like the 1870s and 1880s. They definitely had great leadership. They were led by Sitting Bull, who probably, that's a famous name to you guys. Sitting Bull did not, he didn't trust white people. He said we were like snakes. We spoke with a forked tongue. We said one thing, we meant another. Being two-faced. And then one of their war leaders was a guy named Crazy Horse. Now, some of you guys might be familiar with Crazy Horse. A lot of legend about Crazy Horse, that he couldn't be killed by a white man's bullets, couldn't be killed by white men at all. That he was this invincible warrior. Kind of like, if you know anything about mythology, he was kind of like Achilles, except he was a real person. Crazy Horse was a tactical genius. He was fearless. He gained a reputation for being a great warrior when he was 12 years old. 12, sixth grade, man. Sixth grade. Regardless, if you've ever been out west, if you've ever been up by Mount Rushmore, some of you guys may have been to the Crazy Horse Monument, where they're carving a giant crazy horse. He's on a horse and he's pointing west. It's pretty cool. I don't know when it's ever going to get done because it's so big. But anyway, the conflict kind of reached a high with the Sioux. And the reason it did is because the Sioux were willing to fight back. And as I said, they were led by Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. If you think those are weird names, they probably think your name is weird. It doesn't mean anything. It's just letters. Chris. Why am I Chris? Because my parents picked it out of a book, I'm sure. Okay. Now, the reason why the Sioux became so angry with the settlers that came through is the Sioux considered their hunting grounds to be sacred. And a lot of the settlers that were going towards like Washington and Oregon, oh, by the way, the Sioux lived in like South Dakota, North Dakota, Western Montana, a little bit of Minnesota. They were nomadic. They followed the buffalo, and were mostly hunters. They did do some farming, but were mostly hunters. They considered their hunting grounds to be sacred, and the settlers were going through their hunting grounds. So the Sioux didn't attack the settlers. Instead, they warned the army. They said, listen, if you guys keep doing this, there's going to be some problems. And after a little while, the Sioux did start attacking settlers. Now, obviously, with a pretty organized army, regular old settlers didn't stand much of a chance. So what the military did is the military sent out a larger force, and they started to build some defense posts along what was known as the Bozeman Trail. Now, the Bozeman Trail led from Fort Laramie through Montana. Okay, and Fort Laramie was in Wyoming, through Montana. But the problem is that trail went right through their hunting grounds. And so when the army built the defense posts along the way, the Sioux were angry. The defense posts didn't have enough supplies, so once a month, supply wagons would go along and they would drop off food and water and medical supplies and things at the forts. The Sioux decided to attack one of those wagon trains. And so they found a spot where the Bozeman Trail got really narrow and it was heavily wooded on both sides. And there were wagons coming through, and a guy named Fetterman was in charge of the wagons, and he had 82 men. So one Sioux brave jumps down to the road, lets out a war cry, pulls out an arrow, shoots it over the top, and misses everything, then lets out a war cry and runs back into the woods. Fetterman, being an idiot, ordered all of his men into the woods after that one guy. Yeah, that's right. He thought there was one guy. In reality, there were over 400. The 82 men and Fetterman were killed. Their bodies were dismembered, and the body parts were piled up in the middle of the trail. That generally serves as a stop sign. Settlers stopped using the trail. The Sioux even caught John Bozeman, who the trail was named after him, and they decapitated him, put his head on a spear in the middle of the trail. Settlers stopped using the trail. The army's presence was less, but for some reason, even though they were winning, the Sioux decided to give up and go on a reservation. Now, people always ask why. Maybe it's because Sitting Bull realized that the army was too great and they probably couldn't win. Maybe Crazy Horse figured out that they couldn't defeat these guys. And so because they gave up, they were put on a reservation near where they were. They were put in South Dakota in a place called the Badlands in the Black Hills. Now, if you've ever been to the Badlands, they're beautiful, but there's not anything there. There's not any food. There's a few buffalo, but they don't wander through the same way. The Sioux felt trapped. But then, classic, like the other two stories, someone finds Black Hills gold. and gold prospectors show up. The Sioux are ticked. Okay, they said, you promised us this land. You said we'd be safe here. You said no, they would leave us alone. And now look, white people with shovels. Not too long after that complaint, railroad builders showed up. Now, they may have been the same railroad builders that were building through the Nez Perce land. I'm not 100% sure about that. Actually, this is the first time I've ever thought about that. That would make sense given the geography. The Sioux went, screw this. This is stupid. We agreed to your terms. We went on a reservation. Still, you're invading our land. And they broke off the reservation, and they started to fight little battles against settlers and against the army. So the army sent out this guy named Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer. Now, Custer is relatively famous in American history because he gets him and his men slaughtered at Custer's last stand, or the Battle of Little Bighorn. Now, what more or less happens is Custer is famous for what I think is a pretty cowardly strategy. Custer, like the people in the southwestern part of the country, liked to wait until the warriors went off to hunt or to do religious ceremonies, and then he would come in and kidnap the women and children. And then when the men would show back up, he'd be like, hey, if you don't give up, we're going to kill your women and children. And usually the tribes would give up. So he's holding people hostage. So Custer and his scouts spot a Sioux village. And something about it doesn't add up. There's too many horses around, but all they can see is women and children. That's all they can see, And so Custer comes back to his men and says, hey, listen, we've got this village. All we see is women and children. We're going to go in and we're going to attack in the morning. We're going to take these people, and we are going to get the Sioux to, surrender. And so in the morning, he wakes up, and there's some things about Custer that I probably talked about in class, but Custer was very vain. He was he was a pretty boy. Had his pictures taken and stuff like that. And well, then he went back to get ready for the battle. And when they rode into the village, when Custer and his men rode into the village, they were basically surrounded. Custer had somewhere between 200 and 400 men, depending on where you read. There were 4,000 Sioux warriors hidden in teepees, hidden in tree lines, hidden around the place. And so it basically was almost like a 20-1 type situation. Now, I know that you think you're tough, and I know that you think you're big, but you're not beating up 20 people. It's not an action movie. People won't just attack you one at a time. And so Custer and his men were slaughtered. Obviously, this is a huge win for the Sioux, but at the same time, it's kind of a loss because by defeating Custer and his men so thoroughly, they drew a huge target on their back. The military sent out more people to hunt them down. One by one, the Sioux leaders were arrested. Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, others. Crazy Horse eventually was killed when he fell off a horse, hit his head on a rock. By the way, the whole he's invincible thing, he had bullet wounds, he had stab marks. No one had ever just hit a vital organ. And the end really came in 1890 at a place called Wounded Knee. The Sioux and a bunch of the northern tribes had gotten together to have a religious ceremony. Some people say it was to, raise their spirits for one last battle. Some people think it was a kind of a last celebration of culture before they were caught. Regardless, the military showed up to arrest some of the leaders who were present at the Battle of Little Bighorn. The Sioux were ready to give those people up peacefully, but somehow in the exchange, a gun was fired. No one knows for sure if it was a white person or if it was a native gun. Most people think it was a white person. Regardless, the military opened fire on the people that were doing the ceremonial dance. They opened fire on the chief's council. 290 native men, women, and children were killed. I think I read someplace that all of the Americans that were killed by friendly fire. If you look at the map sheet I'm having you guys doing the assignment, they had guns up on top of hills, and the guns fired down, and they hit some of the people. Now, that's called the Wounded Knee Massacre. At this point, basically all the tribes in the West figure out, if the Sioux can't beat them, we can't beat them, and so they surrender and give up their land. Now, tomorrow we'll look a little bit more at the end of Indian independence, but I think the last 2 days kind of give you an idea of what happens if you try to give up, what happens if you try to run, what happens if you try to fight. Manifest destiny, that justified belief that we were going to move west, made it too difficult for anybody to successfully stay on their land. Now, it's up to you to decide whether or not manifest destiny is right. It's up to you to decide whether or not what happened to the native tribes was, if it was okay. That's kind of your call. I know how I feel about it. So yeah, I mean, that's, you get to decide. So anyway, if you have any questions about any of the things we talked about so far today, yesterday, you have any questions about assignments, that's what I'm here for. Please just ask. Have a great day. Hope you're well. Bye-bye.